Awesome. Well, hey, Andrea, thanks so much for taking the time again. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
My name is Ella Morrissey. I write for the local W, which is a publication that covers the New York Liberty. So just wanted to talk to you. I watched the film right when it came out, and then I showed it to my parents again a week later, and I loved it both times. So just congrats on, the film itself, and then everything that's going to come after that.
Thank you.
So yeah, I know I only have about 10 minutes, so I just wanted to run through a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So just to first start off, so I read that you're a former college athlete. Which sport did you play?
I played golf at Ole Miss.
Oh, nice, cool.
Yeah.
And so I read, you did that, and then you've always had a passion for kind of telling women's sport stories. So I wanted to ask, I know there's a bunch of women's sports stories that are being told now and continuing to be told, which is amazing. So, what about the WNBA and the Players Association in particular, kind of stood out to you, out of all the women's sports stories that you could tell, what stood out about this one?
Yeah, it's a great question because I hadn't been following the W in recent years. As a kid, I followed it a lot. I was, I guess 9 when the W started. Remembered all those names that obviously I wrote about in that opening monologue that Holly Rowe read for us. But when I thought about what story to tell now, because you want to of course you want to tell a beautiful story and a purposeful story, but you also want to make sure it's timely because that's going to bring more eyeballs to the women that you're talking about. And the W's surge of late obviously is really timely. And I knew that would hopefully help us get the word out that we had made the film. So it was honestly as simple as that. Choosing the players was a bit, more, we had to think more about that, but choosing the W, it was sort of like, well, duh, and then obviously my co-executive producer, Jessica McCourt, who works at Malka, had a relationship with Terry Carmichael Jackson at the WNBPA. So that's how we had that connection. And Terry trusting us to tell the story was the other big piece of that. Maybe even more than picking the W, it was that human connection with Terry that we had with the organization. It's like, well, if someone's going to tee you up like that and say, you can get the access, you pick the players, I'll make sure that you can tell the story that you want to tell as filmmakers. Like that's such a gift that, isn't always going to happen in the documentary filmmaking world.
Awesome. And yeah, I know you mentioned, choosing the players was one part of that aspect, and I also wanted to ask about that. So I know there's a bunch of stakeholders in the story, mentioned Holly Rowe and other journalists, and then people involved in the Players Association. But I was kind of wondering, as a Liberty fan, it was awesome seeing, John Claude and Brianna be two of those like main centerpieces. But how did you kind of choose them two and NECA to kind of be the current players that, were the face of this documentary and kind of stood for, what it talked about?
Yeah, it's funny because when we began development and chose the players, they were all on 3 different teams.
Yeah. And
we were like, oh man, are we gonna get grief for the fact that we picked 2 Liberty players? We knew that Unfinished Business came out last year. That was not the plan. We didn't pick based on teams or markets necessarily. We wanted to pick archetypes that represented the whole W. You can't feature more than 3 players without having to pay all 144. And obviously that blows up a budget really quickly. So it's like, okay, let's think about the archetypes within the league that we think are important for an audience, whether they know about the W or not, to learn about. So you have to pick a mother, right? Like that's such an important part of a woman's story, a female athlete's story. So Stewie was our mother archetype. She's obviously a superstar, so that helps. But and Puma's involvement was a big part of that as well, right? So they funded the film, and Stewie being a Puma athlete, it was like there were so many synergies there. But the mother archetype, from my point of view as the director of the film, had to have a mother in there. I also wanted to have a hustler, and it's unfortunately, and it's changing, but there are so many women's professional athletes, women in the W, who are incredibly gifted as athletes, who have been successful on the court or on the field, what have you, and who people don't know enough about. JJ had a tweet that kind of went viral a couple of years ago, and she said, man, seats are disappearing from the table as we speak, as a Black lesbian woman, as a Bahamian woman. So she's that hustler. She's an MVP. She's been to the finals, and yet brand deals don't really exist for her. She's been
Yeah.
hustling her whole life, moved to the States as a kid. So like if you want a hustler archetype, she's not the only one, but like she was a great one for us to have access to. And then you can't do a PA story without NECA, obviously. In terms of archetypical terms, she was our advocate. Like in the original treatment, it was mother, hustler, advocate. NECA was that, because outside of just the W, she's an advocate for so many things. She's an advocate for women, for Nigerian Americans, for athletes. She's obviously such a brilliant woman that we knew that all of her sound bites would drive the narrative forward. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess when you started the film, they were on 3 different teams, and then when Jonquil and Brianna joined the Liberty, did you kind of have to change like angles of the film, whether you're gonna like focus on the Liberty's 2023 season, or kind of how did that work?
It made it trickier because we have so many storylines, and that was one of the biggest challenges in directing the film. And then with documentary, you print a transcript and you organize a paper edit that becomes visual. One of the storylines, or like the B arc, was supposed to be the season, and we still did a bit of that, but it became tricky when you had 2 players on one team and one on the other. And obviously the Liberty's run was historic. The Sparks didn't make the playoffs, so it was like when it came down to final stages of editing, and we were like, okay, what stories need to rise to the top and which ones can we actually kind of lose? The season-long story was one. We thought it was important to show that Stewie won MVP. We thought the Aces Liberty numbers and showing those finals, those clips from those finals, and the heartbreaking end just for sports fans was important, but making it a key story arc throughout ended up dissolving pretty quickly.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Just 2 more questions for you. So I know a lot of the film focused on the Players Association and then just basketball in general, but there was a lot of their personal lives kind of intertwined through that. Were there any, for you as a director, were there any, fun behind the scenes moments like filming those, or just any memorable thing that you can kind of look back on and say that, that was really cool to learn about them and kind of in that aspect?
Well, I guess 2 things popped into my mind. One isn't an exact answer to your question, so I'm sorry, but I do want to say that it was very intentional to cover their lives and not just their basketball careers. Lindsay Gibbs, the other journalist we had, has a quote that I love, and she said, "You can't expect fans to start from scratch. You have to know something about these humans." So from the jump, it was always a human story. We were actually gonna shoot it during the off season, and we just couldn't get funding and ourselves organized enough to do that. And I thought, just as a filmmaker and as a fan of women's sports, that was important to show who they are. Business women. Yes, they are superstars, but they are mothers, they are sisters, they are wives, they are like all of these things. And I don't know, I hope that came through, and I hope that, I don't think you can set out to make a film. It's like, oh, well, I hope it brings X amount of people to WNBA fanhood, right? I hope it has people buying tickets and watching on TV. I think that would be a fool's errand, but I think that hopefully the film got some respect, some like long overdue respect from people who didn't know who these women were. And also at the same time, for people who were already fans of the W, they got to know a little bit more about these women that they were already fans of. So I guess, oh man, fun moments. Everything with JJ is a blast.
She's awesome.
She's just like a self-described island girl. It's like she's so welcoming. She's so laid back. Nisha was so welcoming and open. At the premiere event, I was asked a similar question. I was asked a question about like what hit the cutting room floor that makes me sad. And there was this moment with NECA's cousins and aunt from Nigeria. They live in Texas now. And we went over to like check the mail and went inside, and like her aunt like rolled out a fake red carpet and said, "The superstar is here." And like NECA beforehand, she was like, "Just be warned, like this is gonna be loud. Like these women are Nigerian. Like it's gonna be a blast. Like make sure you guys are ready." And it definitely was. Her aunt was like offering me food that she had made and batched in the freezer, and I was like, I can't fly back to New York with that. But that I know how important her Nigerian culture is to her. And I was bummed that we just couldn't. It felt like too much. It felt like we didn't have a moment like that for everybody else necessarily. So that one had to hit the floor. But like honestly, our whole time in Texas with NECA was cool because she lives in LA. She's like very fancy and sophisticated and all these things. And you go back home to Texas and you see like she's also a Texas girl, which was really cool. I'm trying to think what else. All-Star Weekend was really cool. I got to see Stewie and Marta and Nneka dressed to the nines along with everybody else. And that's when it really clicked for me. You know, Stewie had the Puma photo shoot, which was in like this suite at the Palms. Like that's when it was pretty early on in filming, and it clicked for me. Like, oh man, these women are superstars. Like they live celebrity lifestyles. And I think that it's important. Nneka and I had deep conversations about this actually. Like, I think it's important for people to understand that, because brands don't want to put, you know, the narrative for so long has been that the WNBA is failing. And brands don't want to put good money after something they perceive to be failing. And if we can show that these women actually do have brand investment, that they do live these aspirational lifestyles, that they are superstars, that actually brings more people who are interested in investing. So when I saw that reality in Vegas, you know, sold out Michelob Ultra Arena, I was like, oh man, like this is part of the story for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it was really cool just to see, you know, these women are basketball players, but they're not like solely defined by that. There's so much more to them.
No,
Awesome.
an early working title was juxtaposition, which like as a former English teacher, like it was way too nerdy of a title. But I wanted to show that like women athletes can't just be ball players. Like they have to be so much more, and they excel at being so much more.
Definitely. Yeah. So I guess just one more quick question for you. So I guess just for you know, what's next? I know a big storyline in the film was, you know, the new CBA agreement, which is going to be decided on, you know, this year, and, you know, everything associated with the Players Association. So, you know, do you envision making more documentaries or telling more stories about, you know, what's coming next and the changes that are continuing to happen with the WNBA, or, you know, what do you envision with that?
Yeah, it's funny. Terry Carmichael Jackson has said this is just part one a handful of times. We need to talk about what she envisions part two being. Of course, the CBA opt-out, whether they do or whether they don't, would be a natural next step. I don't know if it would be a feature-length film. I would love to cover some lesser-known players. I think people need to understand that getting drafted in the first round of the WNBA draft does not guarantee you a spot on a roster. That's just like, as a sports fan, that's so it's sad and compelling to me. So I think, you know, if you think of like a Hard Knocks style of show, or like Last Chance U would be a good comp, where it's like you get these women coming out of college, they get drafted, and then you start following their journey. That would be compelling to me. Some retired player stories. I think that would be a bit of a darker film to tell, because you know, we touched on it a bit. There are no pensions. Some of these women, you know, don't know where their next paychecks are coming from, and they founded this league. So I think giving them a spotlight and hearing their human stories would be really cool as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know Brianna and like Nafisa Collier are starting that new league in the off season for those players, so that would be really cool too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's all I had. I think that's 10 minutes, but thank you again so much. It's super exciting to talk to you, and excited for this upcoming WNBA season.
Me too. Thank you for your support. And if you feel like you need any follow-up questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to just type answers for you.
Definitely. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay. Thank you guys. Bye, Keisha.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.